All right, good morning, everyone. It looks like it's 11 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Thank you all so much for joining this webinar. My name is Rebecca Ozaran, for those of you who don't know me. I am the PI on this FireWorks curriculum development project, and I'm really excited to see so many colleagues and other educators interested in fire ecology education. Before we dive into the FireWorks curriculum for Oak Woodlands, I do want to let you all know that we are having a free training series with recorded videos and live sessions that will be held on August 4th, 6th, and 7th. And there will be more information in the chat and some more information at the end of today's presentation. We would love to see you all there, and feel free to reach out to our team with any questions about it, and we'll have our contact info available also. For brief technical details, today's webinar is being recorded. Because all of viewers are muted, please write any of your questions about the presentation in the Q&A box. And if you have any technical issues or comments you'd like to share with the group, you can feel free to use the chat box. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Alex Stefancich, who is our community educator and phenomenal curriculum writer. Go for it, Ali.
Thank you, Rebecca. So today we'll be talking about the Northern California Oak Woodlands fireworks. So the fireworks program was originally created by the U.S. Forest Service back in the 80s, and it was originally developed for the Northern Rockies. And since then, there's been many different versions made. It is a fire ecology and science curriculum, and it's available for free on this website, their Frames website. This is what the website looks like, and so you can use the tabs at the top to look at the different versions of the curriculum that are available, upcoming workshops, information about the trunks of materials, as well as videos of some of the lessons. So as I said before, the original fireworks was created for the Northern Rockies, and since that original creation, there's been one for Missouri River Country, the Sierra Nevada mixed conifer ecosystem, the sagebrush steppe ecosystem. Ours is developing for the Northern California Oak Woodlands. And then there's several more in the making. And even since this map has been made, I know that several other people are looking into making local fireworks curriculums. So you might be wondering why we were making the California Oak Woodlands fireworks. We originally dreamed of this program after the devastating fires that happened, the Camp Fire, as well as many other fires throughout the Oak Woodlands. And we just felt like there wasn't enough education going on with students to conceptualize why these fires were happening and what they could do to change their community's outcomes during a wildfire. So when you think about the history of wildfire, modern history of wildfire in California, you know, we've had increases in the amount of acres burned per year. This graph is from an older scientific study, but I ran some numbers, and so the average for the 2010s decade is about 680,000 acres burned per year, which sounds like a lot. But when you compare that to what historically burned before Euro-American settlement and even before fire suppression during the gold rush or just up to the early 1900s, a much larger area of California burned every year. Historically, tribal people would burn frequently as a landscape management tool. This is a picture from Laura Cunningham's book, A State of Change, and it shows a Miwok man burning a tidal marsh. And this is another picture from her book showing a Miwok woman gathering shoots after a fire in an oak woodland. And you can look at this, the structure of this oak woodland, and see how it looks different from what we think of when we think of our modern oak woodlands. This historic drawing or painting of Yosemite Valley shows a wide open valley with very little fuel, a lot of open space, spacing between trees. And then when you look at this picture of the valley today, you can see that years of fire suppression has very much changed the structure of our forests and woodlands. In looking at this graph, we can see that compared to historic fire regimes, Northern California on the whole is experiencing much less fire than we used to. And the outcome of this is the increase in catastrophic wildfires that we're seeing. As we allow these fuels to build up, it makes for a much more dangerous environment when a fire does happen. And it also has a huge amount of ecological impacts beyond just the catastrophic fires that we're experiencing. Another thing that we were thinking about as we were building this curriculum is just the importance and the impact that fire-wise building practices and defensible space can have on an individual home or community's outcome during a catastrophic wildfire. For example, during the Camp Fire, buildings that were built before the new California regulations on fire safety had a much higher chance of being destroyed or majorly impacted by the Camp Fire than buildings built after that code went into effect. So when we think about these different things that we can do to change the likelihood of a home or a community having a better outcome during a wildfire, there's really a lot that we can do, both as educators and as individuals, to change those outcomes. And this is an old graph, but just a couple months old, but I looked it up and it looks about the same. So we are experiencing some drought in Northern California this year, and fire season has already started. There's already been several fires around the state, little fires luckily so far, but this conversation as we go into fall is just going to get more and more pressing as more and more people realize that their homes or communities could be impacted by wildfire. So to help students conceptualize all these issues and to bring them more into an understanding of fire's role in the ecosystem and how they can prepare for fire and things they can do in their community to make it more resilient to a wildfire, we created the Woodlands FireWorks. And so we did some changes to the original FireWorks program. We focused just on middle school students, and we created 3 different learning cycles. The first learning cycle is on the natural and cultural fire ecology of the Woodlands. The second learning cycle is on the physics of wildfire. And then the final learning cycle is on wildfire preparedness. And in thinking about these lessons, when FireWorks was originally created, the students that it was created for weren't like the students of California today. Now, pretty much any school you go into, any students you teach have either been directly impacted by wildfire, whether through losing a house or a family member, or experiencing weeks of smoke. So students have a much more complex relationship with wildfire than when this curriculum was originally built. And so we've put a lot of time into adding preparations that teachers can take and understanding and guiding conversations to go through these lessons at the beginning of each unit so that you can feel prepared when you're teaching your students for any trauma that arises, and knowing how to best deal with that, And we definitely have a lot of suggestions for lessons where you might want to have a counselor in the room, or different ways that you can think about reaching out to the community and getting additional support for your students, because I know that all the students I teach have been impacted by wildfire, and I'm sure so many of yours have too. So teaching these lessons in a way that empowers them and gives them a sense of agency, as opposed to just increasing the fear and re-traumatizing them, is really important. So now we'll just go through the 3 lesson cycles. So the first one is on natural and cultural fire ecology. And in this lesson, the goal of these lessons is to get an understanding of the oak woodlands ecosystems, to familiarize students with the plants and animals that live there, and also to familiarize them with the tribal folks who have historically lived in the oak woodlands. So the first lesson is on Native Californians' connection with fire. And in this lesson, students read a story from a local tribe about their connection with fire and some of the ways they use fire. And then they also watch some videos about tribes using fire in a modern sense. The second lesson is Who Lives Here? Adopting a Plant, Animal, or Fungus. And in this lesson, students are each assigned a plant, animal, or fungus from the oak woodlands, and they're in charge of becoming experts on this plant, animal, or fungus. And they'll present to their classmates about the role in the ecosystem that this plant, animal, or fungus plays, the special adaptations to fire that this plant, animal, or fungus has, and some of the traditional uses that tribes had for this plant, animal, or fungus. The next lesson is Mystery Trees, and in this lesson, students either go out into the field and use the dichotomous key to identify different trees in the oak woodlands. And if you don't have access to a forest right next to your school or place of instruction, then the curriculum kits, which I'll touch on in a little bit, will have samples from each of the plants, from each of the trees. So you can do this lesson either outside as a field lesson or inside, depending on your location. The next lesson is called Bark and Soil, Nature's Insulators. And then this lesson, students run an experiment to see how bark and soil can work as an insulator for plants and animals who live under the soil against the extreme temperatures of wildfire. So they use a hair dryer, and they heat up a makeshift tree, and then they have a temperature gauge inside to see the graph of how the temperatures change with different layers of insulation. The next lesson is on the oak woodland fire regime. And in this lesson, students read different scientific documents about the historic and present oak woodland fire regimes, and then they debate a bit about what they think the historic fire regime would have looked like and what they think the fire regime currently should be. The next lesson, the Elaborate, is something that was really important to us. This whole series is really hands-on, and we wanted to include a lesson that is specifically aimed at getting students out and involved in their community. So for this lesson, the students would work together as a class or a group to come up with a project that would help to restore fire in the ecosystem. And so this could be either doing fuels management in their community, doing an informational campaign with their community about the role of fire in their ecosystem, or doing restoration projects of different sorts. So this is really kind of a self-directed project that they choose. And then the final lesson is on building a Oak Woodlands community, and they write a story of a fire in Oak Woodlands and then say how different plants and animals were impacted. So just to kind of get a grip of what they learned and work through that. So now we'll move on to the next lesson cycle, which is the physics of wildfire. And this lesson cycle is the one that students love the most. And that is because they get to work with fire. They get to burn things and see how fire works directly. And that sounds really scary to a lot of people, the idea of letting students light things on fire. But after having done it several times, I can tell you that when you set everything up right and make sure students know their expectations, that this works really well and students are extremely engaged. So the first lesson is a demonstration of the matchstick burn boards. The matchstick burn boards are basically a surrogate for seeing how fire behaves in different fuel arrangements and densities and slopes. So this first one is just a demonstration. So you can show it to your students, kind of get a feel for how they're going to interact with working with fire, and then they'll get to do it again at the end. So then the fire triangle lessons. So these lessons let them experimentally look at the interaction between fuel, oxygen, and heat in a fire, and how fires don't work without all three of those ingredients there. The next lesson is called the bonfire challenge, where students, different groups of students are given different types of fuels, and their challenge is to see whether they can start a bonfire with those fuels, a miniature bonfire. And so some students will be giving wet, larger materials, and some students will be given drier, smaller materials. And it just builds an understanding of how the different types of fuels can make fire more or less easy to burn. The next lesson is called the Tinker Tree Derby, where students build a tree and they light a surface fire under the tree and then see if their tree would survive the surface fire happening underneath it, or if the surface fire would become a crown fire. So the students get to move around and arrange the tree in whatever way they like. The next one is another phenomena in action. And so for this cycle, the phenomena in action we have highlighted, or tips and tools to do, are mostly fuels removal projects, because the whole point of this lesson series is understanding the fire triangle and the fire behavior triangle. And the one thing that we can control the most in the fire behavior triangle is fuels. And then the final lesson is the students getting to do the matchstick burn boards. And this is a much more open-ended. They can build a burn board of whatever they like. They can model it after an oak woodland near their house. They can model it after a thinned oak woodland. So there's lots of different possibilities with this lesson. And you can really do the matchstick burn boards for hours on end. There's always something new you'll learn. And then the final lesson series is on wildfire preparedness. And this is a completely new lesson to the fireworks curriculum. And so the first lesson is reading Once Upon a Wildfire. And this book is just a short, simple book of a family successfully evacuating from a fire. And the students kind of read along and think about what things the family did and prepared ahead of time to have this success during the fire. Then they have an introduction to fire preparedness, which includes defensible space, fire-resistant structures, and evacuation planning. And then they get to do something really awesome, which is assessing their school. And so you'd only want to do this lesson series after you talk to your principal or your school board, because they will come up with suggestions for things to change to make their schools more fire safe. But for this lesson series, we really wanted to focus on places that they could change. Focusing on their house might be hard because it might not be possible for them to change the fire safety of their house. But I think having a fire safe school and a defensible space around school is really important. And I'm sure all schools do too. So getting students involved in that project is one way to really increase their sense of agency around this preparedness, and feel safer at school as well. Then they get to go home and prepare a communication plan and go bag for themselves, and a communication plan with their families. And then they'll present their assessment and plan for helping make their school more fire safe. So the one thing about this curriculum is that there is a lot of materials needed. As I said, the natural materials and then all the things for the fire physics lessons, it can really add up, and it is very time consuming to create and find all these materials. So as part of our grant, we did get money for 11 trunks that are located around Northern California. And our curriculum will be going up on the Frames website, hopefully by mid-August. And we will also include on that website connections or outreach contacts for all the trunks and their locations in Northern California. And just one more page. So that was just a really quick, super fast introduction to the FireWorks curriculum. But if you're interested in teaching this curriculum in your classroom, or having your teachers or other connections teach this curriculum, it is a lot of hands-on lessons, and unfortunately we had to cancel all our in-person trainings that were happening in the spring and fall, but we do have one virtual training coming up, as Rebecca said, August 4th, 5th, and 6th. It'll be from 10 to 12 on all of those days, and we'll have 2 hours of reading and videos recommended in advance of each of those sessions. We're working with our funder to recycle the money that would have been spent on an in-person training into stipends for participants. And there's only 25 slots available. So you can sign up starting today at that link. And I'm pretty sure that Hannah will put it in the chat for you all. Great. Hannah, were there any questions?
Thanks so much, Ali. Yeah, we did have some questions, so I'm just going to check in. I have tried to answer them as we go, but maybe yourself or Rebecca can add what I put. The first one was from Christina Callahan. What are the current building codes, and are they by state, county, etc.? And I answered that one by sharing the institute, the ibhs.org website. So you'll see that in the answers. Ali, Rebecca, have you anything else that you'd like to add?
Let's see, I might have put it on that slide. I know that California specifically, oh, I didn't put the name of it. California specifically, I can't think of the numbers, but California specifically created a new state building code in 2008 for all new structures. There are codes around defensible space, and I do believe that those vary from county to county, and they're enforced in mixed amounts based on location. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't answer that more clearly.
No, that's great. Christina, if you want more from us on that, do feel free to contact us. We may have contacts who could help you. Okay, then I had Tricia Dunlap, a very pertinent question right now. Is this curriculum able to be used in a distance learning situation? And Ali, I did try and respond that that's something we're certainly considering, and we hope to offer some ways of doing that in the August training. But I'd say it was a journey that we're working on as well right now.
Yeah, so we're trying that out this week. We've been putting a couple of the lessons into the 4-H virtual camp that's happening. As we continue forward into the fall, and because all of our field trips are canceled, once we get all the curriculum up and running, and that's kind of done and out of the way, we have the website good to go. I think that we'll start doing more re-envisioning of lessons for a virtual setting, because, as I said, fall is the time when I think everyone is the most nervous about wildfire, and when those lessons are most important. So it'll be something that will be coming down the pipeline as we try out these new virtual versions. We'll continue to work with the Frames website to get those up and available.
Excellent. And I'm going to keep moving fairly quickly because I see we have some new questions that have just come in. So alignments to NGSS, those are expressed with each lesson plan. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, yes.
And then somebody asked if there's a similar training program for adults and community members living in fire-prone areas. My suggestion is you reach out to your local fire safe council. If you find you do not have a fire safe council, then we could perhaps connect you to your local cooperative extension fire advisor. You should have to be fairly nearby that could perhaps help.
Yeah, and another potential resource too that many communities are kind of developing right now are prescribed burn associations. I know that there's some in Mendocino County, there's one developing in Nevada County, which is where I am, but they're kind of popping up and they're more focused on that kind of fuels management, fire preparedness, and specifically using prescribed fire to do fuels management.
Excellent. Okay, so let me just see. So I would say that we've answered a question about living in Southern California and the resources available there. And the list of activities is on the Frames website, but not necessarily the ones which are the ones that the exact ones that Ali's just gone through. We're going to be updating the Oak Woodlands ones to come up there very soon.
Yeah, we're hopeful to have everything from our lesson series up by mid-August.
So I have a good question.
But if you join the training, you might get early access to them.
So here's a question about the training. Are you able to use the lessons and the curriculum without attending the August sessions?
Yes. They're up free online for anyone to use. We do provide more background and there will be additional presentations that are specific to just kind of increasing the depth of understanding around fire so you can feel more comfortable sharing and answering student questions that do come up. But we want as many people as possible to use these resources. So you can hop online anytime and look at the resources, download them, print them out, use them in your classroom. Please do.
Excellent. Are there specific high school lessons?
So the Sierra Nevada version did use, so the original FireWorks was created in 3 sections, elementary, middle, and high school. Just for ease of time and because of the size of our grant, we didn't have enough funding to convert all 3 versions. We just did the middle school, but the Sierra Nevada version does have a high school version. The Northern Rockies version does have a high school version. There's also a generic version on the Frames website. And the only sections that are missing from that generic version are the ecosystem specific lessons. And we chose to do middle school just kind of as that way people could easily bump it up or bump it down. And I would say many of these lessons I've even done with adults in different learning programs, and they find them just as interesting and informational.
Perfect. I see that we are drawing to the last minute really of the presentation today. I do want to draw attention to the chat room. So regarding building codes, there is an answer from Susie Coker in there. Susie is an expert within UC regarding fire and forestry. So do take a look in the chat room and that will help.
Thank you, Susie.
And Ali, thank you so much for speaking today. It's great news about all of this. And for those who I didn't manage to get to answer in the chat, please feel free to send any questions via email. I'm going to put my email address in the chat room right now. And we'd love to follow up with you. I see some people who are interested in delivering trainings themselves, and we'd love to help with that. So do contact us by email. And I think, let's see if there's anything.
Did you want to do the poll very quickly before we go?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to just launch a poll now.
And as that poll is going, just know that the training that we're doing virtually, after we have it online, We will be recording all the sessions, and then the whole training, including the back reading, video suggestions, information, will be available for anyone to watch on through the Frames website. So we want to make this as accessible as possible.
Thanks so much to all who are taking the poll, and we look forward to seeing you guys again when you maybe can help join us for the next training that we have in August.